Today I want to quickly talk about what this means and what HTML5 and the new web means. And I'm very happy to be here because I normally try to get out of my comfort zone. I normally speak at web developer conferences and at conferences of people that actually are already doing this kind of stuff. And it fascinates me how many people are going to conferences to be bored because they see things that they've done before. So here I'm a bit out of my depth because I don't use Eclipse and I don't do Java. And it's quite interesting to talk to you about some of the new things that we've been playing with. And I also want to make sure that we understand a bit that we are in the middle of a hype about HTML5, and we have to understand that not everything is as rosy as it's shown, and it doesn't make sense to actually go for that. But first, let me tell you a quick story, and that's about the Snow Cruiser. The Snow Cruiser is a vehicle that was built in the 1930s in America, actually 1929. And its idea was to go down to Antarctica, to the Arctic, and drive around for 3 months there. So that was the job. That was the description of the job that it had to do. It needed to actually have a crew of 6 people survive for 3 months in the ice and really in a hostile environment. And the problem with Antarctica is that you just don't drive around there because there's these cracks in there as well. They can go up to like 50 meters or things like that, and so you could fall into those. So they had to build something that can actually withstand the cold, make sure that the people don't die, and actually has quite some speed that you can go through it and actually chart the whole territory that was uncharted before. It had a plane on it as well for like reconnaissance and these kind of things, and it was absolutely amazing because what they've planned for is that these tires could go in the body of the car overnight. And the whole heating system of the car would make sure that the tires don't break apart because it was so cold. And you could also detract the tires and put them in. So you can push one in and shift it out. In case there's a crack in the ice, you can actually put the tire in and shift the thing over, just slide on it, and then put the other one in and pull it over again. So that was the whole idea of that. So the engineering of that thing was absolutely incredible. And it was a big thing. Everybody loved it. The press wrote about it. Wherever they drove through America, when they went up to the ship to go down, they actually got surrounded by people. And they were already 3 months delayed because of that, because they couldn't go as fast as they wanted to down there. And it was like any piece of like machinery or engineering, they did everything right. They did the planning right, with experts building it. And they did testing with it as well. So these are the tests where they actually played it in the... oh, that's good. That doesn't work. Wonderful. I shouldn't have used Chrome, should I? There you go. These are the tests where they actually went to the Indiana fields and they tried it in sand and they tried out that the thing worked. So the tests were running. It showed that the thing can drive. And you see just how huge it is as well. So this thing was really heavy, and it was interesting to try it out, and the press was nuts about it. So these tires were like this big, and it worked out. So the tests ran fine, much like when we do software. We actually do our unit tests before we actually do the thing, and then we test everything. It's fine, great. In the office it works. Then it comes to shipping. And that's always the problem with software as well. And that was the same thing with the cruiser. So this is when it actually came off the boat, and then they realized that actually it's not quite heavy enough. It's a bit too heavy for the ramp. So it crashed into the ramp while it was actually standing there. That was the first danger. They almost lost it into the sea. And you can see already it starts smoking. Because there was one little thing that they forgot. They never tried it on ice. And seeing that the whole continent that they tried to map is ice, it might have been probably a good idea. Because as soon as they put it on the ice, it spun uselessly and the engine overheated within 3 minutes. So they've done everything right, they had experts planning it, they tested it, and they never tested it in the environment where it was supposed to do. So they put second tires on to give more traction, didn't work either. They tried for half a year, then they got called back to America because this Second World War thing started, and they left the thing behind. And 20 years later, somebody came and tried to do something with it. They cut some ridges into the tires and made it work again. Didn't work either. Nobody knows what happened to that thing. It seems to have just cracked off an ice float and went into the ocean. So the whole thing is a wonderful story of how we can do everything right in engineering and fail completely because we don't understand the environment that it's going to be deployed in. And I see it a lot with software. I see this a lot with web. I've been a web developer for 16 years, and every single year I have people coming from other directions and telling me what the web should be like. And I'm like, you know what? It's not gonna be to your will. It's always gonna have a will of its own, and it's always gonna be something that you don't expect it to be. So we do these old approaches to a very new challenge. A lot of people build websites like we built them in 1996 and wonder why people are not excited about our products anymore. We're not on desktop computers anymore, most of us. We're on laptop machines. We've got those things. This one has a quad-core and an 8-core graphics card. That's more than most of my desktops had when I started. We have these smartphones. We're moving away from sitting in front of a machine with a fixed connection, with a fixed resolution, and we don't know anything about what people do out there. So our product should be much more flexible, and we should approach and embrace the chaos that is the web instead of trying to force it into something. Whenever I talk to designers and they are from an enterprise environment, they tell me like, well, it's a 1024 resolution. There is no such thing. There is no such thing as telling a user you have to have this resolution or that computer or that browser. This is not the web that we talk about. So when it comes to HTML5, a lot of people now think something like this. Everybody goes like, oh, this is the coolest, newest thing. It's those race cars that are really, really fly and have a helicopter thing as well and go on the water, and everything is cool with those. And the problem is with that we are in a hype cycle. Every new technology that comes out, and you can go through history of publication, goes through this hype cycle. So we have a technology trend, something new comes up. And the press gets excited and says, like, this is the coolest thing ever, and if you have sick kittens, it will actually look after them, and it's the coolest thing ever. And then all of a sudden we realize that it's actually cloud-shaped. So we're going through this trough of disillusionment, and then we go to slope of enlightenment, and we go to plateau of productivity. So we always go through that massive waste of this here. With HTML5, we are there, but almost here, depending on who you're talking to. Because we've been promised things for about a year or 2 years now that just haven't been done yet. And it's interesting to see how many people get very excited about this. And I blame the whole message of that HTML5 is the Flash killer. And Apple killed Flash, and we needed HTML5 for the iPads and these kind of things, so we got to do something with it. And that means that a lot of people go through random demos. This is Opera's website that actually is called shinydemos.com, which is quite honest, I think. And whenever you go to HTML conferences, you see like shiny stuff being shown. I don't want to do this live right now, but let me show you a few things what I mean with that. Like one of the things I see a lot of people use, for example, right now, which is the coolest, newest thing, is WebRTC. WebRTC allows you to access the camera. And as you can access the camera and put it in a video element, you can access the video element with WebGL or with Canvas to do all kind of stuff with it. So this one here doesn't use any Flash now. This is pure in the browser, HTML. I have to give it access to my camera. And once I have the camera access, I have, ooh, look, I'm on screen, mom, look at me. And as the camera image is an input device, much like any other, you can actually access it and do filters on it. So I can do these kind of things, I can do this, I can do a top mirror, I can do a bottom mirror, quad mirror. I can play hours for that. And that kaleidoscope fragment. I like the quad cam and split screen and so on and so forth. Film strip. And this is cool. We need this kind of stuff for like doing something like Skype online and doing these kind of things. It's very important. There's one filter called LSD, which is pretty cool as well. I don't know. But if you talk to people that have been using Flash for a while, they say like, 6 years ago I've done that, what are you talking about? And we're like, well, we don't need a plugin, so that's pretty cool, right? You also have these kind of, WebGL is another big thing that people always show you. Let me quickly show you. This is a demo that people always talk about, WebGL, there we go. So this is now in the browser as well, 3D light shading, all kind of stuff going on. And you can build these things in the browser nowadays without having to use a plugin. And it's pretty cool to do that, but the problem is that there's still a lot of compatibility issues with it. Like a lot of hardware doesn't support WebGL. Microsoft doesn't support WebGL, which is another problem, slight problem. And people just get too excited about this to my degree. It's like, this is cool that the web can do this now, and we need gaming and we need 3D environments to test the performance of things, but this is not what your clients are most likely to ask you for. Like, oh, I really, really would like to have a cube with rotating images on each side and a video with playing in the background. Not necessarily the normal spec that you get. But it's pretty sweet that we can use these things online right now. So what I have a problem with is that we're just showing demos to people and we're trying to get them excited about it. And the problem is that a lot of times these demos don't work. So I was at the Adobe event in London the other day, and they showed like 5 HTML5 demos, a lot of them from Google to show off what Chrome can do. What was the one with OK Go that is called It Only Gets Better, which is like pop-up windows with synced videos in them. And I'm like, 2012 pop-up windows? Really? This is the new stuff that you want to show? And every single time you see these things on stage, luckily enough, I'm wired here. Normally, there's a connectivity issue, or something doesn't get loaded, and something fails. And then everybody's like, ha ha ha, look, demo, it happens. And I'm like, sorry, we cannot show cool stuff and it fails and then think people should still be excited about it. So this was a Flash developer saying, like, we all laugh that these demos keep failing, but the lack of robustness in even simple HTML5 apps not bother anyone else. And he's right. And the problem is that HTML5 is stable. Demos, by a definition, are not stable. So demos are the things that we show you and get you disappointed. So what's the point of doing those? Another big thing is the backwards compatibility, because HTML5, from a standpoint, from a very beginning, was meant to be backwards compatible. The whole idea of HTML5 was that the W3C came up with XHTML2, which nobody wanted and nobody ever used, and it was a very academic exercise built in some laboratory. And they said, we're going to do this now because the HTML thing is not good enough. So it would have been an XML format for the web. So anytime there would be an HTML error, just a syntax error, it would not render the page. Which means if you put some ad code in, which all is completely awful, your website would not show to your users. So the HTML5 working group people now, back then a few people just said like, oh, I'm sorry, that's not working. We can't break the web. The web is there already. There's millions of websites being built that people use every single day. We have to do something that's backwards compatible. So a big joke and haha always is like, okay, how do you test this HTML5 or HTML? Does it work in Internet Explorer? If it doesn't work, it's HTML5. And that's funny, but also sad, because if it's HTML5, it should work everywhere. You have to define what work is, because it should not be the same everywhere. The biggest fallacy that people do about the web is thinking that every website should look the same in every environment. That means you're sending out JPEG images. That's the only chance you have. Everything else will be rendered differently in different environments. You cannot expect this device and this device and this device getting the same web page. This is not playing to the strength. A functionality of the web is so flexible that I can give you the best experience here, the best experience here, and the best experience there, with the same code base. And that's something that a lot of people don't embrace yet, and I think we should much more. Business reports, on the other hand, are already calling out that HTML5 failed. When I talk to analysts, they're like, it's still not ready for prime time, give it another 5 years, the spec is not finished, and oh my god, we cannot do any software until the spec is finished. Have they ever done any real work? Because I've never worked to any spec that was finished. I've worked to specs that was finished and were pointless, yes, but I didn't work to any spec that really said like, yes, now I can start something. It's moving too fast for specifications right now, so you cannot wait for that stuff. And I think software patent issues and software like ISO certifications that take 5 years are really holding us back. So a few truths about HTML5 that might not be that aware of a lot of people. It is a totally new challenge. We are in a new environment. We moved away from the desktop. We're going into mobile. Not as fast as a lot of people make us believe in America when you go like, oh, I've got an iPad 4 and you're just not necessary anymore. Like, not everybody has the coolest, newest phones. Not everybody has a really cool connectivity. But we're moving there. You will not be able to rely on people having desktop machines and people loving enterprise-level software because it's not going to be that way anymore. We will have these devices, we will have these smartphones. Companies don't stop buying stock phones for their people because everybody has a smartphone and comes in with their own. So instead they make a company app that people can use. And this challenge is interesting because to me the web was always about flexibility, and people call me crazy a lot of times because of that. I never fix things. I just let them flow and let the end user decide what's the best way of actually displaying that stuff. And with that amount of plethora of devices, of tablets, of phones, of smartphones, of dumb phones, of old phones, of fridges, of cars, all of these things should be able to display your web content, and they will be able to display their web content. The next big thing will be TV set-top boxes, because everybody has these massively clever TVs in their house, and they don't use anything, do anything with it except for watching TV. Okay, that's what a TV is meant to be, but it can do more. And set-top boxes can connect them to the web. You already see with Kinect and 360 that people are using these for gaming and connect with other people over the internet, and that will be the next thing. And you cannot tell me that it will be any other technology than HTML. Because HTML5, CSS and JavaScript are dead easy to learn, very easy to deploy, and really easy to update. So a lot of companies will go for that rather than doing native code where you are at the beck and call of some company. There is no one browser. Right now, we're in this wonderful hype that people say WebKit is the only browser engine you need to support because it's on iPad, it's on iPhones, it's on Chrome, it's on Macs, it's everything. No, it's not. WebKit is different from browser to browser as well. There's different renderings in the browser, and you will have to support the other browsers as well. You will have to support Internet Explorer for a start. And that's just not going away because they have a lot of users. And you will have to support Firefox because we're awesome. And we're also the option that you have that gives you the freedom that you don't have with any of the others. None of the keystrokes in Firefox gets recorded. In other browsers, not so much. You can install browsers across devices, across platforms, except for Internet Explorer. You can use these kind of things in different environments. So saying that one browser is the one that you have to support is just stupid. Because it will never be that way. We have a lot of outdated and bad web products out there. You know these room booking systems, the timesheet systems that we hate to use every single morning? The reason for them was that in 1999 somebody said Internet Explorer 6 is the only browser we need to support. So let's not repeat that mistake. I always call that the Stockholm syndrome of interfaces. I go into companies and they have these like 6,000 form field pages with like 20 tabs and like 5 steps and wizards and like a little thing in the corner telling you, oh, this interface is really shit. Do you want me to help you understand it? And I go in there and I show them a simpler interface. And I'm like, this is what it could be like. And they're like, it's nice, but I don't want change. You know, I planned every morning 10 minutes to go through the interface that I hate and hate myself, and I don't want to change, I don't want to learn new things. That's why these new devices are a great opportunity for that as well. The touch interface was the biggest revolution in this. When you see kids nowadays, they go to magazines and try to scan the images or try to zoom into them. And that's cool. I like that. Kinect and these kind of things is the next one. I mean, the whole like, oh, let's move my hands and be Iron Man and do things with that. That will come in the future. But physics are against us there. My favorite is Minority Report. You know, when you got to like, you do that all day long and your arms will be like this. And it will fall off. And like, but it's actually Tom Cruise, so it's on this height. So we could sit down. Connectivity will always be an issue. There will always be some fat hamster that is in the pipes of the internet and clog them up. I mean, it's amazing when you get fanboys of the new iPad and they're like, and I got a Retina display here as well, and they're like, oh, everything is Retina now. Don't do any images that are less than 2,400 pixels because they look like shit on my computer and I'm awesome and I need everything. Our 3G world is not ready for sending that much image data. Our 4G world is not ready for this. The hardware of our mobile environments don't send that much data by protocol. So don't pretend that there will always be a fast connectivity. If your app needs to be online all the time, you're doing it wrong. If your app crashes when it doesn't have any connectivity, you make me mad. And British Airways does that. Every time I go to the airport and try to show my boarding pass and I'm offline, it crashes and you're like, shit. So that's why I take screenshots of my apps. And that's not what I should be doing, but this is the only way you can do it right now. So thinking offline is very, very important in the nearer future and in the future to come. We don't have these cool devices with lots of storage to be online all the time. Why can't I just download the thing and watch it offline? And I'm on planes all the time. I watch my movies offline. I don't want to stream them. That doesn't make any sense to me. A download of a video is much, much faster than a streaming of a video. And okay, you can't control it then. That's what the film industry has a problem with, but we have to find issues around that. So the biggest thing that holds HTML5 back is that we get no love from the hardware providers. So this here is the browser JavaScript engine, which is really fast and amazingly good nowadays. I can do live green screening in videos. I can do like all kind of like computations that in the past I needed an extra computer for. I can do that in the browser now. Our JavaScript engines are incredibly fast. Our CSS engines are really, really good. When I work with the Chrome people and I work with the Firefox people, I'm amazed how well they do. And then the mobile operating system completely messes with us. This is the stopgap that we have right now. So when you hear about performance of native apps versus HTML5 apps, this is the problem. It's not that HTML5 is slow, it's that a web view in an iPad will never show as fast as a native app. By hardware, by definition in the hardware. And the reason is, like, why would I, as Apple or as Android, make the web better than the native applications or equal? It's shooting myself in the foot because all the money comes from apps. Like all the hardware is sold cheaper than it really does. This one I dropped the other day and tried to replace it, and they asked them how much it would cost, and they said, well, just buy a new one because they're sold so underpriced, repairing it would be more expensive than buying the new one. And that just makes me sad, but at the same time it just shows me that we will never have parity in HTML5 in native environments that are locked down. Like Android, we have a chance, because Chrome for Android is now out as well. It's not mandatory yet, sadly enough. It still is the old Chrome browser as well. Like the Android browser is the new Internet Explorer 6. This will haunt us for a few years to come. Because if I can't upgrade to Jelly Bean, I will not get Chrome as the browser. I will have the Frankenstein browser that is called the Android browser, which is a bastardized Chrome that's been down in the basement and nobody gave it love for years. The HTML5 rendering of that browser is awful, awful, awful. That's why Firefox for Android is another good opportunity, Chrome for Android. If you have a new Android device, please, please, please use that browser. The standard browser that comes with it is awful. And it just annoys me that we are in this situation where we can be blackmailed by hardware providers to actually use native apps. A lot of native app development is actually HTML5. A lot of people build HTML5 apps and use something like PhoneGap to make a native app out of it because it's easier to build an HTML5 app. If I want to write it natively for iPhone, for Android, for Symbian, for all the things, I write my code 7 times. With HTML5, I write it once and I render it out to all the different native environments. So how do we reach that enlightenment slope? How do we get through that disillusionment and get to the next level? HTML5 to me should always be thought of as something like this. The amphibious car that was in the 1950s in the army in Germany, and it looks like shit, but it's pretty cool. It's like, I can drive this on a dirt road, I can drive this on the street, I can drive this through a river. That thing has so much space between each thing, I can put a wrench in there and fix it. Nothing is fixed in that thing. I used to drive one of those. In the winter it's really awful because there's no heating in it. But it's just pretty cool that this thing is more or less indestructible. And that's what your HTML5 start should be. It should be applicable to different environments and do the best thing where it can do it. It can look like this in new browsers. That's not a problem at all. But you should start with something that works and not start with something that looks shiny and breaks apart in old browsers. Because we don't want not being backwards compatible. So HTML5 is a necessary evolution from documents to apps. And that's what the main thing was about. HTML was meant for documents that are linked to other documents. That's not good enough. We need good form fields. We need good interactivity. We need multimedia. So this is what HTML5 gave us. And it based on great ideas. Not breaking the web. XHTML2 was not good. We came up with HTML5. It's backwards compatible. An input type date gives you a date picker in Opera, gives you a text field in any other browser. You don't have to write a date picker on top of that. You can just allow people to input the date by hand, and if the browser supports it, they get a calendar. That's how backwards compatibility works. Consistent parsing of markup, that was the biggest thing in HTML5. If you look at the specification, it's like this big. As developers, we need this much. The rest is done for browser makers. So for the first time, we have a definition of how a browser should render HTML. In the past, it was just the HTML specification, and browsers did whatever they pleased. That's why Internet Explorer had a different DOM model than all the other browsers. That's why Netscape 6 was the first browser to actually use the DOM model that we use now. And now all the browsers are equal when it comes to parsing. You can rely on this. If the browser says it's HTML5 compatible, it will render HTML in a certain way. It will be very forgiving with it. That's the other thing. Like, you cannot close your tags, the browser will close them for you. The reason for that is that there's so much bad websites already out there on the web. We did not want to break them. We didn't want to tell people you have to upgrade those, because most of the time they won't be. I don't like that much. I think it would be good if the end user get a message like, this is total crap, I don't know what it is, I try to render it for you. But browser makers are not too happy about this, and content providers either. Multimedia access. A video is the same as another HTML element. I can access the video, I can rotate it, I can access every single frame of it, I can use Canvas to access every pixel of the video. I can just overlay the video with other stuff, I can just make it a background. All of these things that in the past were impossible because Flash was not native to the browser and something strange inside it is now totally possible. And richer forms. We don't have only input boxes and select boxes. We now also have date pickers, we've got color pickers, we've got sliders, we've got all the cool things that you had in Swing and other libraries before. So it's not about what we can add. It's not about the shiny demos and the cool stuff. It's about what we can't take away that will make the future of the web. And the future of the web, what we can't take away, the first thing it starts with is a URL. Apps in an app market don't have a URL. It's not the web. It's damn hard to find. You have to use a search. You have to navigate through a market to find the thing. If an HTML5 app is on the web and has a URL, you can find it in Google. You can find it anywhere and then install it. You're not at the back-end call of the search interface of a certain market. And the URL is, to me, the biggest thing. And URLs are very, very important. And when we take away the URL from the app world, we're going back in time. We're back in a time where we put floppy disks or CDs in our computers and installed software and uninstalled it. This is not what we should be doing anymore. I want software on demand. And I want things that I can throw away and have quickly and don't need anymore. A very small footprint is very, very important as well. Yes, these things are fast and these are wonderful, but also you install 6,000 of those and then you don't find them anymore. And it's very important to understand that the smaller you can get, the smaller your first load is, the better. The first load should be instantaneous. Then you can download lots of data, cache it offline, and next time you go, everything is on the device. But the first load, if it takes longer than 3 seconds, 90% of the people will not come anymore. And that's statistics that somebody came up with and somebody tested, and I've seen it myself. It's like, on those we're happy, we just stand there and let's wait for 5 minutes. On those, if it's 10 seconds, we're like, rubbish, that doesn't work anymore. And it always fascinates me when people scream at their thing like, oh, the maps don't work. And you're like, you're aware this goes up to space and back. This is like 1950s sci-fi stuff. This is Star Trek in your hand. We're so tainted by that now. We're just like, yeah, there's no second that it's bad. Adaptation to environment. Like, a good web product adapts itself to what the user has. It doesn't tell the user that they have to be better, that they have to change something. If I have a big screen, I should get more content. If I have a small screen, I should get bigger buttons because my fingers are fat. I shouldn't have this little link that I can't just reach and have to scan in and all these kind of things that you have to do. Offline storage, very important. This stuff has to be offline. If I open it up in a plane and the flight attendant shouts at me that I shouldn't turn on my phone, I should have my content. It should be the best mean to achieve a goal. Like, an app should do one thing and one thing well, and not like 10,000 things. Atomic updates is the thing that HTML was always the killer for. If I needed a new image, I put the image on the server. The app cache realized there's a new image, just downloads that image. If there's a new level of Angry Birds, I have to download 23 meg of data. Just for a new level. Why can't I have a 1K level as a JSON object or something like that? On a web, with a web app, I can do that. Atomic updates now came to Android as well on Jelly Bean, but it's not quite there yet. On the web, it's always been that way. And don't make your users download stuff they don't need. It's a bad idea. Simple maintenance and localization. Localization of HTML has been around for a long, long time. And with binary data and hardwired images and these kind of things, it's much, much harder to do. So what we set out to do as Mozilla is to liberate the hardware. The hardware lockout of hardware providers telling us, hey, HTML5 is slow, look at that, you need to go native, was just not right. So we came up with the web APIs. These are standardized. We work together with other browser makers to actually standardize on APIs to access hardware. So this is all the things that are in a normal mobile phone. And these are all the things that we have now as open APIs in JavaScript available from the browser to the device. A lot of them are APIs that are dedicated to the user, so the user gets asked, hey, this website tries to access this, do you want to allow it to? Yes, no. And that can be done on the fly. That's another thing that annoys me about things like Android. In Android, every game that I download, a puzzle game, I want to have access to your address book, your camera, your history, your location. I want to have access to everything. And you're like, why? Because I need to. So, because when you do the first install on Android and you don't ask for everything, and later on you have a new feature where you need that piece of hardware, you can't ask again. In a system like in HTML5, I can ask any time I need access to that. So I don't have to say up front, yeah, I want to give you access to my firstborn, go for it, because I want to play that puzzle game. This is live data coming from Bugzilla. So all the green dots mean we have it, all the red dots mean we're working on it. Or you can work on it, because all of it is open source and available, and we need people to help us with that. So we can do telephony calls, we can send text messages, we have multi-touch support, we have a battery API, we have the web vibration API, which vibrates the phone, which was called the vibrator API, but there were too many stupid jokes about this, so we renamed it. And you can all find of that at aremobileyet.com. And all of that goes together under the word of Firefox OS. So we build our own operating system that is written in HTML5 for the phone. So the whole operating system for the phone is written in HTML itself. The only thing that is in there that's not HTML is the Gonk core, which is the Linux core, the same one as Android uses, and these web APIs on top of it, which are the drivers for the hardware, and the rest is done in HTML5. And what we want to do with this is liberate the hardware and bring connectivity on mobile phones, web connectivity on mobile phones, to people who can't afford an iPhone or an Android. So we're talking to, in South America, we want to release them mid-next year or beginning next year. And we already are partnering with Telefonica to get these things out there. So to test these out right now and see what that looks like, there's an emulator in the browser. You can actually build it yourself. You can, there's also a simulator, and you can build Boot2Gecko yourself, which is the engine under Firefox OS. But to test it out in the browser, that's the simplest way of doing it. And when I go to Firefox right now, I can show you that. I can go to B2G Desktop, and that one shows me the Boot2Gecko Firefox OS interface. So this is what it would look like on a phone. And it does the same thing that every other operating system does. So you've got your dialer, you can actually dial numbers, funnily enough, and you have your contacts, you can have the history of your calls that happened, you can send out calls, you can actually go back from calls. How do I go back? In the emulator is always a problem. But you know what? Fuck it, I've got the phone. This is an operating system running on a mobile phone that is completely HTML5. Nothing in there is not open source. Well, the hardware drivers, but that's a different story. But I have a phone now here, and I can actually show that to you. So, so this one now is another WebRTC thing that I've done. Look, I can access my camera on my laptop. Awesome. So this is the phone. They're going to go out next year. We have a preview thing that developers can ask for, some of them soon. I'm not going to give you any dates because I don't work on the outreach team there. But yeah, this is what it looks like, and this is what it's going to be. So for the first time, you can be a web developer and access everything on the web right now, on the phone right now. So the emulator works fine. The source code is of course available on GitHub as well, and Gaia. And I like that one here where you have the this is the keypad. So if I dial numbers, this is what it looks like in HTML. And even the notes, even the tones that when you hit the different keys are actually defined in JavaScript. So you can change those numbers and have different dial tones and play Gangnam Style when you get a telephone number or something. All of that is available and is actually out there. And what I love about that is that for the first time we just said mobile phones should not be locked out. And this system will be available really quickly, and we need people to help us with it. And I just love the idea as a web developer to do everything in an operating system in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And it's sandbox, it's secure. It's not the problems that we have on the web with JavaScript that like, okay, some ad could spy on my stuff. Doesn't work. Because you are in an environment that works. The interesting thing is that the emulator also allows you to preview applications. So we don't want you to build Boot2Gecko or the Firefox OS. We're doing that. We're together with Telefonica and other people as well. We want you to build HTML5 apps. And the preview allows you to take any website and install that page as an app. So in the previewer then, Wikipedia would be an app that actually is just in your page, is one column and automatically got converted. So it generates all the manifest files on these things for you. And I love the idea of just being able to get my apps out that way. And as is HTML5, we also have a search functionality in there that would allow you to find apps on the web. So you don't even have to submit them to our marketplace. If your app is on the web and it actually will be the right app to actually get that content for you, it will find the app and you can install it from the web. You don't have to submit anything, you don't have to actually go through the pains of getting it reviewed and these kind of things. So it's a very interesting thing. Firefox OS, take a look at it. But let's go back to the whole idea of HTML5 and what we do with it. I think it's a knowledge merger. And at the Adobe event, one of the Adobe people basically had said that all the Flash developers now can choose if they want to do Flash or HTML5. Their knowledge is not obsolete. Their knowledge can just be reused in another environment. And I think that's very, very important, because the whole fighting like, oh, we fight Flash, ha, you bastards, jQuery is more used than Flash, haha, who cares? In the end, the product should speak for itself. And if the end user has a better experience on Flash because they're on a really old browser, fair enough, not a problem. But the reuse of the knowledge is very, very important, and it's happening already. And Adobe are very good in actually getting Flash developers to understand that HTML5 is a very important thing. Conversion is another interesting point. This is the banana bread demo, which looks like crap here, so I'm going to show it to you instead on as a video. So, where is it? Banana bread, there you go. This is a 3D shooter in HTML5, JavaScript, and CSS. This is the frame rate it has in the browser. This is running on Firefox nightly, and actually on Firefox in the browser right now. And this is what it looks like. It has all the cool stuff that actually a 3D shooter has. But the absolute best thing about that one is it's not written in HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript. It's written in C++. And we got a system called Emscripten that allows you to convert C++ to JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. So instead of having to learn all this new stuff and learn all the tweaks and make the browser behave and make the browser perform, C++ developers can just convert their stuff over. And there's a few 3D engines being ported already right now. So I can write OpenGL games in the browser with WebGL without having to learn a new technology. And I think that's incredibly important, that we don't ask people to start something new, but actually reuse what they already know. And Electronic Arts are not going to build a new HTML5 department and hire lots of people and fire all their old C++ developers. But they would be happy to convert some of their games over. And this is what the Emscripten engine allows you to do. Tools are very important, of course. Adobe has the new Edge tools coming out. So there's an animation tool that actually is like Flash but renders out CSS. There's the Reflow, which is a responsive design tool. They're all pretty sweet and they're all pretty interesting. And I love that Adobe went up and stepped up and did that because nobody else would do it. Because they know how to do tools. As much as we hate Dreamweaver and we hate Photoshop, they've been used for years. And they know what people want. So help them out to actually build things for the future is good. Every browser these days is not a browser, but also a development environment. And far too many people don't use that yet. So every browser has a debugger, has a step-by-step debugger of JavaScript. I can set my breakpoints and I can find out what's going on. Most of web development happens in the browser because we just need to fix what is going wrong. You can fix your code up front, that's fine, but most of your errors will be in the browser, so you should debug it where it actually happens. And in case you haven't seen that, because a lot of people in Firefox are still going for, oh, we only have a Firebug, which we had for years, which is cool, but fair enough. But this one here, let's take the Eclipsecon website. Let's do something that looks like from the 90s. So I can right-click any element, and I can say inspect element, and I got my text editor down there, and I even have a map of the whole element, much like I have in Sublime Text and other things. And I can edit this thing live here. So I've got the Fight Club thing here. If I just right-click on that one and say inspect element, I find the Fight Club message here with lots of, it's actually a P, not a heading, lovely. And I can say, instead of Fight Club, let's call it Cuddle Club. And I've got my Cuddle Club live. I can save that now. I can change the page as it happens in the browser rather than having to change it somewhere else. So I can save that code and then put it back into my environment. I can see all the CSS applied to all the elements and which one has been overwritten by which other element. And it just works that way. I've got a wonderful little thing called Scratchpad where I can write a massive JavaScript and run it against this website rather than only having a console where I can actually do one command at a time. I've got a command line where I can actually type commands and do everything that I do with my mouse here also by typing commands like highlight this, go there, go to next element if I'm a blind user, for example, that doesn't have a mouse, or if I'm a keyboard user that is much faster that way. We even have a 3D environment where you can see the depth of the DOM of the document. So you can actually see how many levels deep your HTML is that way. And you can still right-click anything and start editing it. So these are every browser, Chrome, Firefox, Opera, Internet Explorer, is also a development environment nowadays. So when people say there is no development environment for HTML5, you're lying. There is. It's called the browser. It's where it happens for the end user as well. Remote debugging is a very, very important thing as well that Chrome has and now Firefox has as well. You don't want to build code, send it over to that thing, reload it, shit. You really want to do it directly on your desktop and see it life-changing in the browser, and that in the mobile phone or in the tablet. And that's exactly what remote debugging does. So this one we got as well. So I think all in all, it's a matter of shifting our approach, because magic happens outside of our comfort zone. We really have to understand that the web is something different than software. It's a software platform, but also a medium. It means that people can change whatever you want in the end. You don't have any fixed environments. And I always call it escalator engineering. An escalator is a wonderful thing, because an escalator cannot break. If an escalator breaks down, it's a set of stairs. You can still walk up to the next floor. It's not as comfortable, but it doesn't block you out. If a lift, or an elevator as Americans call it, breaks down, it's a small, uncomfortable room that doesn't make any sense. But an elevator will always be a staircase. You build a staircase and then you make it move. That's how you should build web applications. Make the thing work everywhere and then make it better. Make it better after testing that the browser and the environment can do the things you want to use. Don't make it great and then make it like less great in old browsers. This is not going to happen because it means that in the next iteration of maintenance, the old browser will not be supported at all anymore. Build something that works and then goes further. And you can do that nowadays with really simple things. Here's a wonderful, this is a bar chart that I built that is just fed from that form. So if I don't have any JavaScript or if I want a BlackBerry or something, I just got this table. The information is still there. The bar chart is using JavaScript and CSS. There's no Flash or anything involved here as well. And it's actually looking quite sweet. And it's enhanced progressively. That's what it's called, progressive enhancement. It's an escalator. It's not a lift. So I want you to do your part of that. You might hate JavaScript. You might hate HTML and CSS. And it's not Java. You're not a real programmer. You don't even have a beard. These kind of things. There's a few things you can look at. Responsive design is one thing that all of you UX people and UI people should look at. This is CSS media queries. And it basically tells you if the screen is above 1024 pixels, or a maximum of 1024 pixels, make the background yellow. If the screen is 780 pixels or less, make it blue. If the screen is 400 pixels or less, make it red. So I can define the different layouts in one single CSS file. And the browser allows me to actually change that. So if I try that out in the browser, and I do the responsive HTML thing, let me find that quickly. This is not the one. This is the one. Modern web development, responsive HTML. That's what that code does. So now I'm yellow. When I resize it, I get to blue. When I resize it, I get to red. I didn't have to write any JavaScript. I didn't have to do anything extra. I just had to write that CSS. And in Firefox, there's actually something, because that's annoying. If I actually have to resize my browser to test these things out, I don't have my buttons, I don't have my developer tools anymore. So in Firefox, we put this responsive view in, responsive view in there as well. So I can say responsive design view, and in there now I can actually simulate different sizes, and it actually does it in the browser window rather than having to resize the browser window itself. And I can rotate it from landscape to portrait as well. So in the browser, I can test different devices before I actually send it out to the device that way as well. That's responsive design and testing it. Client-side validation, the bane of existence of every Java developer. You always write your great server-side validation, which is absolutely necessary. Like, we cannot get rid of server-side navigation ever, validation ever. But then you write the same thing in JavaScript again, and it's just annoying because they get out of sync and these kind of things. Nowadays, client-side validation is this: a required attribute on a HTML element. So right now, if I wanted to send this form off, for example, it tells me, please fill out this field, because there's a required on it. If I put something in there, it actually would send it off, but I stopped that from happening right now. This is all you need to do to make a required element. There's also, you can put a pattern in there and put a regular expression in there to say this is what is required for that one to be a valid field. So don't use 10,000 jQuery libraries for that anymore. It's in the browser. It's a very, very simple way of doing it. Video. This is how you do video nowadays. No Flash needed. This is a video saying like MP4, that's for iPads and for Safari. WebM is for all the open browsers, so you have two videos. That's annoying, but there's no way around it at the moment because of licensing issues. And then you just link to the hedgehogs.mp4 video with an image and saying click above to download it for all the others. Why should I force somebody with an Internet Explorer to have a plugin and get a video in yet another format? They can just click on an image and watch it in their VLC or media player or whatever they need to do. Think escalators. Don't think making this elevator with like rocket packs on the side for everybody. This is totally fine. Like, if I download this in my RSS reader and I see it, great. I don't download a video I don't want to load on my mobile phone. That's exactly how we should be thinking about these. Animation and transitions in CSS. Ah, wonderful. So again, the problem is that Chrome is not prefixless yet. Firefox is. So, no Flash, no plugins, just CSS. No JavaScript. So I've got this animation move here that moves the little fox car around, and it takes 2 seconds. It goes alternate, forward, backward, eases in, so instead of just being really hard, it goes slower and gets slower back, and infinite means it should repeat it all the time. And this is how you animate things. And on tablet devices, this will be hardware accelerated. Your JavaScript will not be hardware accelerated, so it will eat the battery in 5 minutes and make the thing really hot. With CSS, it doesn't do it. Animation, in most of the cases, is a nice to have. It's not a necessary thing. So if you shift it out to CSS, fine, that's exactly what we should be doing. Transitions as well, so I've got this ball thing here, which I defined as 100 pixels with a background of blue and a transition of 1 second. And then when I hover over that ball, I make it round by using a border radius of 50-50 and make it red. So when I now roll over this, it changes it within a second smoothly from one state to the other. You could write that in JavaScript, you could write that in Flash. You don't need to, the browser does it for you. The transition means do whatever happens from one state to another smoothly. Offline and local storage. Local storage set item, local storage get item. That's as simple as storing things offline. So this is a key value store only using strings. A better way of doing it is IndexedDB, where you have a full database layer on that. There's something called app cache, which allows you to do the whole app offline. And there's a great library called Launcher, which makes all of that much easier. Because the only problem that this very simple API has is that it's synchronous. So if you do a lot of data into that, the first load of your app will be slow. So you have to make sure that you do it asynchronous with something like IndexedDB, and Launcher works around that issue for you. Drag and drop upload and conversion. I don't want to have another form field that uploads 10,000 files. I have to pick every single file. Nowadays in a browser, I can use this thumbnail thing here. This is what it does. And I can take any image that I have. So for example, I've got a few images here. I can drag them into the browser. And it generates the thumbnails on the fly in the browser using Canvas and JavaScript for me. I don't have to do a server call for that. Every server call is slow. Every server call is bad. If you can avoid them, avoid them. So this one now here would be a normal upload field in a browser that doesn't support the things like drag and drop and the file reader, but the other ones give you that functionality. And I can actually change the sizes as well, so I can do a 200 here. And then it will make the thumbnails bigger or higher in this case. I can set the background. All of these things that I could only do with ImageMagick in the past now actually totally works in the browser. So I think it's the most important thing is that we're making it that simple. We're making it far too hard for people right now. So there's a lot of things going on right now that will make it simple for people to embrace HTML5. One of the things that HTML hasn't done is actually extend to the level that we want to. So we want to have things like slide boxes. We want to have maps. We want to have these things in HTML. They're not there. So there's a system called Web Components, which is another new standard that has been proposed, and it's built in the Firefox in the Chrome nightlies. And in Firefox, we actually wrote a library called Xtag, which makes that work across all browsers, including Internet Explorer 9. So I can write this kind of markup, like X tab box, and I get a tabbed box. And X accordion, I can get this. So this is not generating it like it would do with a JavaScript library, but it's using the internal components of the browser to render these things. So I can actually, when you look at, for example, in a video in HTML, and you take a look at under the hood of all the elements that get generated, like the play button and these kind of stuff, this is all parts of the browser that you can now access with web components. And you can see that work with the Xtag library. You can see it here. So for example, I've got a map here that I can zoom into, and all I had to do was xmap data key and the API key for it. I have something like a flip box where I can flip the thing around, and you can flip it at the other way around. I have a slide box where I can toggle the orientation and slide it upwards. And this is all the HTML that is necessary for that, the images inside the X-slide things. So we can extend the browser itself with HTML now using these web components, and that's going to be very important in the future. Simple packaging. Yeoman is a system by Google that allows you to create all the packaging stuff that you need to do with web apps, like the manifest files and all these things very simply. Take a look at that. It's a bit geeky, but it actually does the job. And I think in general we have to rethink tooling. There's a great talk by Brett Victor called Inventing on Principle. And that one, the main principle that he has is saying you should never be far removed from creation to output. We build something, then we compile it, we go for a coffee, and when it's finished compiling, we see the result, shit, didn't work. So what he says that every editor tool should also be the creation tool, every creation tool should be the consumption tool. Much like I said that browsers are now debuggers as well. So this one here is an example of a game that he's done, where you can stop the game, while you play it, and you get this timeline up there, and you can move the timeline forward and backward and make the jump perfect that it can actually reach that star. So you can actually make the success condition of that level by playing the game. And when you change the slider, it changes the code automatically. And you don't have to go in the code and change the numbers all the time. You do it from the game. And that's a very powerful thing that's already happening there. So he has this thing called learnable programming, which shows that exactly that way. So instead of having a fill, ellipse, and these kind of things, every editor should give you a visual representation about what is what. And when you just slide on the number, it should change the value and show the output immediately. That way people can learn programming much, much better than just like, oh, that's the syntax. I know it doesn't make sense, but you have to use it. It's called PHP. So these things happen already, and that's the cool thing. One of the last things, because I'm running out of time, is Adobe Brackets is a text editor that Adobe has written. And the cool thing about Brackets is it is actually HTML5. So the editor is written in CSS, JavaScript, and HTML, and you edit HTML, JavaScript, and CSS in it. When you open it, it opens itself, which is a bit weird, but pretty cool. So this editor is like any other text editor, but the really cool thing that they've done is they have an editor in the editor. So if I have a CSS class here, and I press Command E, I actually get all the CSS that is applied to that class in all the CSS files. So instead of having to go to another tab and edit that CSS file there, all I have to do is stay in the same editor and just go through the different documents and edit them one at a time. And when I'm done with it, I hit escape and I'm back to my HTML. So I keep the whole editing of the whole project in one file. Not in one file, but in one editor. And I really like that idea because I myself, I'm using Sublime Text and I've got far too many tabs open that I have to jump in between, and like there's keyboard shortcuts for that as well. But I think it's much, much cooler to have the context in the code itself. So the time is now and the place is here. You shouldn't wait for HTML5. You can use that now. The simple things that I showed, the required on an input element, please use that stuff. We can't wait for people to not use it. Because if we want to make the web work, this is the way to do it, and the time is now to do it. So I'm hoping that I managed to introduce a bit of these things to you, and every time you do it, think of escalators. And that's all I had, so thank you very much.